believe we've had this thing for 30 years? Okay, so I am one day late. I had to work yesterday, so I couldn't put the video at the right time. And I have to say, right time is kind of relative here. I mean, if we go by the Japanese launch date, then yes, April 21st, 1989 is the birth of the Game Boy. But as far as North America is concerned, it took us a little bit longer to get this little gray brick. July 31st, 1989. Not that much longer, but I wasn't sure when to actually put this video out. Do I put it out in April or do I put it out in July? Since the entire internet collectively started celebrating in April, I guess my hands are tied. As I've made very obvious over the course of the last couple of years making videos here on this channel, I am a massive fanboy of the original Game Boy. I have all sorts of weird, like, I mean, this one is not so weird, it's just a backpack, but if it looks like a Game Boy, chances are I have 2 or 3 of them. I have this mug here, I have this little thermos, I have all sorts of stuff. You name it, I have it. I have a whole bunch of t-shirts. I got this little pillow here, which isn't exactly a Game Boy, which I assume is for reasons of not having the license to actually do this, but it's close enough for me. I got this throw blanket, which actually looks like a proper Game Boy. If they put a Game Boy on it, I want it. Wallet, check. Passport holder, check. Phone case, you know it. Playing cards? I don't even play cards. I haven't played poker since college. That's some 15 years ago. I don't even know if I know how to play it anymore, but I saw this thing, I had to own it immediately. Part of the reason why I am so obsessed with this console is that I grew up wanting to have a Game Boy so bad, but my parents couldn't afford one. As I've mentioned here on this channel before, I'm originally from Brazil, and video games are very, very expensive in Brazil. And when you have siblings, it becomes very hard to justify buying a portable console because who gets to actually use them most of the time? If my parents had bought me a Super Nintendo, which eventually they did, it's for all of the kids, so they all presumably get to use them equally. A lot of the games can be played by 2 players at the same time, whereas a Game Boy is a little bit more difficult to share. I'm actually very curious about the people in my audience who had to share a Game Boy among siblings. Let me know, how was that? So for a long time it was something I lusted over and I just couldn't own it. That's why I have them up on my wall. I have some in a display case here. I just absolutely love this console, which is kind of weird when I openly admit that it wasn't exactly the best portable console, even when you consider the time when it came out. Its competitors like the Atari Lynx or the Game Gear were better than the Game Boy in a lot of ways, except for, of course, battery life. And maybe that was all that was needed for this thing to take the world by storm. When I travel, this is where I put my toothbrush and like my toiletries. Mind you, my childhood wasn't entirely Game Boy-less. I had a Game Boy for about 1 month. 1 year before I went out on summer vacation, some kid in school wanted to borrow one of my computer games, and he had a black original Game Boy. And I said, I didn't think he was gonna go for it, but I said, I'll let you have this game, which I wish I remembered what game it was. It was some PC game from back in the 90s. And I said, you can have my game if I can take your Game Boy. And I honestly didn't think he was gonna go for it, but he did. And he let me have his Game Boy with a little pirated cartridge that had 8 games in one. I remember Motocross Maniacs was in there, Super Mario Land, of course, golf, what else? Tennis was there as well. Then my family went on a road trip to our hometown and I was there for about 4 weeks or so. When I came back to school at the end of the summer, I wasn't sure if the guy had forgotten about this deal we had. So for the next like week or week and a half, I was kind of like sneaking around the school hoping he wouldn't find me. We crossed eyes one time in the hallway and he didn't say anything and I was like, oh my god, maybe he wants to keep my game and I can have his Game Boy forever. I was so excited, and then like 2 days later he's like, hey, didn't I let you have my Game Boy for the can I have it back? I was very sad that day. No joke. I actually tried to convince my parents to put me in a different school, which was dumb because the kid knew where I lived. So it's not like I was gonna get away with it, but you know, I was a kid. Though I've been a lifelong emulation fanatic, when it comes to the Game Boy, I like to collect actual games. And I think it goes with the fact that I didn't have one growing up, or at least not for more than a month, and the only cartridge I did have was a parted cartridge. When I had this Game Boy Pocket modded by a Reddit user, he asked me if I wanted him to up the voltage on this thing so that I could use flashcards. So basically a flashcard is something that looks like a regular cartridge. I mean, if you're watching my channel, I have to assume you know what it is, but if, in case you're like one of 3 people who watch my videos who don't know what a flashcard is, basically it looks like a regular cartridge that you can actually put ROMs into it. And I asked him to do the modification because I figured go big or go home. If I'm already spending that much money and just PayPaling it away to some guy I don't even know in the hopes that he's going to actually deliver, I might as well get this thing with all the bells and whistles. But I never bought the flashcard, and I really have no desire to. When it comes to my Game Boy, I want to actually buy the games I want. There's some games that I've been looking everywhere for, like Burger Time Deluxe. And the thrill of actually looking for this game adds to the excitement of collecting them. I know that one day I'm going to come across this thing on some retro shop or a convention or whatever, and I'm going to lose my mind. And then I'm gonna cry because it's probably gonna be like 50 bucks. I mean, I've been playing this game for months now via emulation, so it's going to be hard having to part with actual hard cash to acquire a game that I already have access to. But again, I'm a collector, so I need to have it. I'm jealous of people who grew up with the Game Boy and were able to take it to whenever they traveled with their family or going to school to play with it during recess. I didn't have that growing up. And now I have literally every single one of them. Even the Game Boy Light, which was super exclusive, only came out in Japan for some reason. I had to buy it. Like, I felt like I couldn't call myself a Game Boy collector if I saw a Game Boy Light at a store and passed up on it. Though I didn't have a Game Boy growing up, it was always on my peripherals because I had friends who had it. I would read about it in gaming magazines. The Game Boy was actually officially released in Brazil, so I would watch the commercials for it and everything, which only made me want it all the more. And it's ironic, I've mentioned this on the channel before, but the original Game Boy is probably the worst hardware to play Game Boy games on, but I do like to play them on original hardware from time to time to just get that experience again. These games run so much better on emulation. The image is so much crisper than this crappy screen this thing had. There's filters, there's save states, there's ROM hacks which add colors to games that didn't have color, like say Super Mario Land 2DX, but there's still something charming about this gray brick here. Let me know of your Game Boy experiences. Like I said, I'm particularly curious about people who grew up with one Game Boy in their household and they had to pass it around to their siblings. Was that as frustrating as I imagined it was, or was it manageable? Let me know. If you're new here, consider following me on social media, both Twitter and Instagram. I'm super active over there and I'm always so thrilled to connect with you guys. Consider dropping a like, that helps the channel out so much. Subscribe, hit the bell, you know the drill, right? Anyway, that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy and I'm done.